Hi guys, today we are going to learn how to create these gemstone drawings. These are examples that were left behind from an art teacher that was here at Cedar Creek before me. Her name was Mrs. Welling, and I do believe these were even student examples that were left behind. I don't believe these were her specific ones. But I really enjoyed this lesson, and so I have kind of used it with my kids as well, because I feel like there's a lot of things going on in just this one piece of art. So there's contrast, the black and the white. You see it not only in the background, but also within each gemstone or each jewel. There's some shadows, so you can definitely, and highlights, so you can definitely see that there's depth going on here. We want it to look like these are truly gemstones that have been placed on a nice soft white cloth, and maybe they're out for purchase. Somebody's kind of inspecting them to see what their true value is. So here I have a tissue, ooh, fancy, fancy, and two very old, probably gross erasers. But the idea is this is supposed to look like just a cloth sitting out, and these gemstones are sitting on top of it, and they're on display. So my erasers are definitely a great example here. You can see their worth and their value. We're getting real fancy over here. But you can kind of see how there's a shadow created where the erasers are kind of snuggled into this piece of cloth, this tissue. And I think at one point I would guess there used to be a lot more value down here. It looks like it's kind of, you can see fingerprints if you get it in the right light, where maybe the artist did have value and it just kind of rubbed off over time. I've been here 5 years, so I can only imagine how old these pieces are. But there would definitely be more shadows down here, sort of in the crinkling of the cloth, like what you see on this real tissue. Not just around the edges of the gemstones. So we're going to hopefully achieve that today. Now, if we were to do this lesson in class, I would give you 3 pieces of paper. I would give you the first piece to actually draw 3 gemstones on. And then once they were all the way complete, it would take us a couple days to do that. Once they were all the way complete, I would actually have you cut around the edge, this little scalloped edge right here. You can tell we cut around in this wavy edge, and then you'd take them off and move them aside. Here you can see too, these are just pieces that have been glued down. So I don't want to ruin this artist's work, but you can tell these are individual pieces that have been cut out and then glued, kind of overlapping. The third piece of paper would be that piece of paper that's supposed to look like that really soft cloth. So I would give you another white piece of paper, and you would just cut out some kind of curved, soft edge, and then you'd of course glue it to the last piece of paper, which will be a black piece of paper. Since we're doing these from home and we just don't always have all of those supplies ready, I'm going to show you a different way to do it, and we're just going to use one piece of paper. You may notice too, this piece of paper is about half of the size, so these, the ones that I'm going to make are going to be a lot smaller. You are going to use whatever you have available at home. The materials that I have, this is a 9x6 piece of paper, so it's a bit smaller. I'm going to use a pencil. I also have the ultra fine point Sharpie, and I have a fine point Sharpie to kind of add the contrast in the details of the gemstone. And then I'm going to do a fun technique. I can't remember if I've taught you guys how to do this or not, but I've got washable markers that I'm going to add. We would have done watercolor pencils. Had you guys have been in here, we would have used the watercolor pencil technique, which I don't know if we've used a whole lot of watercolor pencils before, but they have a really beautiful quality about them. What I'm going to do is, I'll kind of demonstrate a little bit. You can tell here, this is just the back of a different example. Here, I kind of used this color right here. This is my washable primrose. And I kind of added a thick line of color around the edge. And then I'm just going to use water and a paintbrush. So you might not even have a paintbrush at home. But if they're watercolor markers, you can kind of get this edge wet, and what it's going to do is it's going to give your color a little bit of depth. So it's going to be darker around the edges and lighter toward the middle, and it'll kind of create the illusion that this top part is rounded. It's not flat like our paper. There's a little bit of curve to it. So you can even see the highlights from my water because the water's moving, but the water has depth to it. So you can kind of see that. What else? Even my ruler is flat, but you can see there is the tiniest little bit of depth because there's highlights, and then it's a little bit darker around the edges because they're farther away from the light. So it's kind of the look we're going to achieve with just these markers. So obviously I'm going to use Sharpie, which will not run when I make the details around the edge. That's just something kind of fun I wanted to show you, though, how to achieve that color in the middle. So you can't use a washable black marker to create these details if you're going to add water here, because it's actually going to make the water run if you use a washable black marker here too. So that's kind of a heads up for you guys if you do want to do this Crayola washable marker technique. So to get started, I am just going to start off by drawing some loose shapes here. Maybe a rounded shape. More of an oval kind of squared off shape. Maybe something with a point over here. And notice I didn't make them too close together because I would like to have these grow a little bit. I'm going to grow out when I begin adding all of those details with my Sharpies. Clean up the edges a little bit. Now I'm going to add, I always like my thick Sharpie. I definitely think there's a time and a place for a thin Sharpie, and today is definitely one of those. But when I'm outlining something, I almost always go for my thicker one. So what we're going to do once we get all of this in here is we are going to start adding details outward. So we're not going to focus on the middle quite yet. I gotta erase those lines so they don't show up later. We're going to start adding these details, and I like to do it just with my Sharpie. I don't like to draw it first. I like to just kind of keep going. So the idea is that we're going to have a pattern with lots of contrast. So you may start off with maybe this scalloped edge around the outside of your jewel or your gemstone, but it won't just be one row or level, I guess. I'm not sure what you want to call it, but you're not just going to go around it once with some kind of pattern. You're going to go around it a couple times. So if you did kind of this scalloped looped edge, maybe the next row is something different. Maybe I do a bunch of lines kind of going from the tops of those out. Now, this can't be the edge of my ring, a true or a cufflink or a earring. You wouldn't probably have this really jagged edge around it, so I'll probably have to do another layer. But I wanted you to notice the contrast that I'm creating. Inside the scalloped, curved sort of rainbow lines, it's a little bit lighter. You see a little bit more white. And now the contrast is happening because this next row, this next layer of detail, you definitely see a little bit more black. I like the contrast as well, where with the scalloped edges, it's really soft, kind of fluid. And then with this detail that I'm adding right now, they look kind of sharp and jagged. So it's really, it's darker and just the whole feel of this detail is a little bit different. So that in itself creates a contrast. So the last thing that I can do, I'll make it a little bit darker up here because I got darker as I went around, didn't I? I don't want to leave the edges like that. So maybe I just do a simple like so. And I can maybe even do a double row just for fun. All right, so there's my first gemstone. Now I'm going to work on the other ones, and just for the sake of time, I'm going to pause this video, and then I'll talk about what I created when I come back.